Hello Nwashte, it is your relative Justin Jack Hoda Holness, and welcome to another episode of my story vlog where I'm telling my truth and sharing my story. Today's vlog post is about my professional career. I thought it would be very helpful to share some of my life experience in regards to some of the jobs that I've done and how that led to my professional career today. And I think that sharing this story vlog with you guys is very helpful in regards to putting in perspective where my life experience comes from that gives me the value of what I share with my audience today. And I think my professional career has given me the value to, provide a really interesting perspective into a lot of the things that I talk about: music, politics, indigenous people, those sort of things. And so I thought this story vlog would be very helpful to put into context where my value comes from in regards to sharing my experiences, especially in the fact that, I do a lot of presentations and performances. And so I thought this video would be very important to share with you guys. So let me take you all the way back to when I was 15 years old. And at that time, I was in high school going to Dakota Collegiate in Winnipeg. And right across the street, there was an IGA, which is a grocery store. Very convenient for me to go to and from. I applied for the job. I got the job, and my role was just to kind of stock the shelves, and I was in the back where the freezers to stock all the milk and stuff like that. Now let me tell you the mistake that IGA made hiring me at that age. The mistake they made is hiring me at that time of my life to be in the back refrigerators where all the chocolate milk, the yops, the ice cream was. And so being there, I definitely indulged, and I didn't really last long working at IGA. Long story short, they let me go maybe 6 months into the job. So from there, I actually moved from St. Vital, living with my mother, and I moved to Transcona to live with my father. And so I had to enroll into Transcona Collegiate, where I met a lot of new friends. Big shout out to Stephanie. I met her going to Transcona Collegiate. She's still a good friend of mine today, and she worked at a pharmacy. And so she was able to get me a job working at the pharmacy. It was a lot of fun working with Stephanie. And it was an interesting job. They had a ticket master in the back. I thought it was really cool to be selling concert tickets. The job was very repetitive. You take the stock off the shelves, you wipe the shelves clean, you put them back, you go to the cards, you flip the cards. Here's a quick little story about the cards, like cards that you give on different occasions, birthdays, etc. When I eventually moved up to work the cash, being in that position at the front of the store, you can see everything that's going on. And the demographic that Regent Pharmacy catered to was a mature, older, senior demographic. And so a lot of seniors came in, and I thought it was hilarious to sit back and watch seniors come in, look at the cards, find a card, write in it, put it in an envelope, go to the back where we sold stamps, put stamps on it, and mail it out without paying for the card. I thought that was hilarious. So I definitely let that slide. I never, try to pop nobody. I ain't no snitch. I just thought it was entertaining. But that was, a great experience working at Regent. I developed a lot of my early skills there in regards to, keeping the books. So making sure your cash balances at the end of the day, those sort of basic skills. Just being responsible for your day-to-day tasks. Then, I was very street involved. So when my parents divorced, I rebelled and I moved out. So I was living on my own at that time. And so when I got let go of that job, it was actually very crucial for me to get a job that paid me consistent. Aside from some of the things I was doing in the streets to make money, I needed something legit and consistent. And so I eventually got hired at People's Jewelers in Winnipeg at Polo Park Mall, and that job was life-changing. I'm now 17, 18 years old, and that job was actually a big part of my professional career, taking a huge shift for the better. Being the rebellious person I was for some of those small reasons that I explained, working there was a huge opportunity. So it was Christmas time in December, and they're looking for staff to basically do the cash. And so they hired me to do the cashier position. And so, crazy quick story is that I rolled up in that interview with a hoodie on, jacket, vest. Those were super cool in my day. I had Tim's on, baggy pants, a do-rag and a toque. And when I walked into that job, I had to take my do-rag off, the toque off, and I took the jacket. I was just wearing a baggy hoodie with baggy pants and Tim's. The fact that they hired me, I have to give a big shout out to, the person that referred me to that job, which I happen to know from the community. And they hired me for that job, and they're like, you're gonna have to get a suit. I was like, a suit? I don't really do suits. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. After my interview process and the fact that they hired me, I went to my dad. I'm like, yo, Dad, is it cool that I borrow some suits from you? He's like, you wanna borrow some of my suits? I'm like, I got a job at People's Jewelers. So I went to his place and I tried on a bunch of suits, and actually his suit jacket was the first jacket I've ever worn. And so when I put on those suit jackets and I put on a tie and a collar and, fitted pants with the crease in them and black shoes, all of a sudden I noticed how everybody would start to look at me different in a good way. I noticed that the ladies would be taking a longer look than they used to. And so I really started to like this vibe. And I really, felt proud about wearing a suit and, getting the respect from all walks of life. And I realized that the minute I put a suit on, it literally broke down a barrier of interacting with all different sorts of people. In context, wearing a do-rag and a toque and a baggy hoodie, baggy pants sets a tone. It sets a judgment right off the bat of the type of person you might be. And so putting on a suit, it just was a total different experience. And working in a place like People's Jewelers, etiquette is very important. And so that job taught me a lot of my people skills. It taught me a lot about how I communicate to customers. It taught me a lot about customer interaction, sales. I got a huge lesson learned on sales, live experience on how to sell to customers. And so I had a great experience working at People's Jewelers, life-changing. I ended up working for People's for 5 years. And, they quickly moved me from cashier to being able to do sales on the floor. And wow, like what an experience. I loved the ladies I worked with at People's. I'm still in touch with them. Whenever I go back to Winnipeg, I always pass through Polo Park and I still see some of the staff there. So big shout out to People's Jewelers for helping change my life for the better and giving this young man an opportunity. And wow, like that was a life-changing career move for me. Working at People's Jewelers for about 3 years at the time, I really started to love this concept of a gentleman. And so if I could describe myself in one word, it would be a gentleman. I'm not perfect, but I'm respectable. And I think that's a great way to kind of put me in perspective. I'm a hopeless romantic type of person. And so working there taught me a lot about my professional career and how to carry myself as a professional. And so that was a great job. And then in those 3 years, on that third year, living on my own and really trying to find myself, I decided that I wanted to take a leap and move in with my mother, who ended up moving to the Ottawa area. I met a girl in Toronto by going to Caribana. That's a whole other story. And so, her living in Toronto and my mom living in Ottawa, it's obviously closer, so the relationship would be able to work out in a different capacity than long distance. And so I took the leap to start over, start fresh, change my life, do something new. Right before doing that, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was hosting their first national event. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was the first national apology for the residential school experience. And so my mother ended up knowing Lisa Michez, who my mother gave Lisa the referral for me to kind of be working in this type of environment. Considering that my mother is First Nation, born and raised in Saskatchewan, our community is Oshaman First Nation. And so that was really important actually for my mother to, guide me to have that experience, to understand the history and the historical context of where she comes from and the history of Indigenous people. So working at the TRC and their first national event in Winnipeg, which was historical for Winnipeg, one of the largest gatherings of Indigenous people at the Forks, That was a huge life-changing moment for me because I was never exposed to that part of my history in that way ever in my life. Indigenous awareness and identity was not as, widespread as it is today. Working there and seeing so many beautiful, amazing, professional, indigenous people and the work being done about the residential school experience, I took a lot in. I was sports tent coordinator, and being sports tent coordinator, I had to learn a lot about the athletes that attended residential schools. And I can tell you right now, some of the stories that I learned, I'm gonna carry for the rest of my life. And I can share with you that working at the TRC, I remember they were having this huge sharing circle, and the Governor General at the time, Michelle Jean, she was there, and she was very important person of color, so I was very fascinated about her coming there, and I wanted to know more about what was going on. And I didn't have any training at the time. I didn't know a lot about what it takes to hear some of those stories. And so I actually snuck into the sharing circle. I remember going up these stairs and checking these doors, and one of the doors opened, and it was the small little balcony on the second level where the sharing circle took place. And there was an inner circle where a lot of the survivors were, and there was medicines being passed around, and then there was an outer circle where a lot of the witnesses were. And I remember one of the women sharing her story, quivering, and what I heard, I'm gonna carry these stories for the rest of my life. And when I realized how this country, Canada, treated our First Nation Indigenous people, I got very upset. I got very angry. But instead, getting angry in a negative way, in a rebellious, bad way, and being very careless and destructive, I decided I want to be the best version of myself. I want to be the best human being that I can be to prove to people that Indigenous people should not be treated less than human. And so that's where it shaped a lot of my perspective of my identity, who I am and what I represent, because not only am I Indigenous, but I'm also Caribbean. I'm also Black on my father's side, coming from Jamaica. And so I have two strong histories, two strong backgrounds of genocide. And so learning so much about my mom's side and not as much from my dad's side, just because we don't live in Jamaica, I feel way more connected, and I know a lot more about my Indigenous heritage than I do my father's side. That's changing now in these later days of my life, but I know a lot more about my Indigenous history than anything else. And so, just quick context, I have 3 grandmothers, and all of them went to residential school. I only have one grandmother left who actually ended up teaching Nakota language classes at the First Nation University in Regina, and I'm hoping to attend that school coming next year, 2020. And so, for me to learn about this history changed my life. I want to be the best version of a human being to prove how amazing Indigenous people can be. And so being able to take this opportunity to move to Ottawa to live with my mom and start over, buy a place, become a full man. Moving there, I got an opportunity to attend a job fair, and I started to apply for this leadership program. And so I did some more digging online, and I saw the amount that they're paying for a 6-week course. It was $4,000 or something like that. I was like, $4,000 for 6 weeks. Yo, I'm down to apply for that. And so it sounded like this leadership camp is what it sounded like. And so I enrolled for this thing, and later I found out that I actually enrolled myself into the Canadian Forces military through the Black Bear program, which is for Aboriginal recruits. And so when I figured that out, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna keep my eye on the money. $4,000 to develop my leadership skills in the Canadian Forces. I'll take this as an opportunity to learn from the inside, how this country operates their military. And so I was actually very excited to, experience this military process. And so enrolling, I took it very serious. It was my basic military qualification course. I graduated top candidate, and I also got the Comrade Award. Top candidate comes from the staff, and the Canadian Forces military staff themselves. They basically pick their best candidate. The Comrade Award comes from your fellow recruits, so the people that are also going through the training themselves, and they pick somebody who they think is the best candidate. And I feel so grateful and humbled to be receiving both of those honors. And that really taught me that I'm a natural born leader. It taught me a lot of the skills that I didn't know I had, because the military does a great job at breaking you down to your weakest point, but giving you an opportunity to build you up in a team environment. And so that was fascinating for me, to be working on in a team environment with other Indigenous young people, all striving for the same goal. It was very liberating to be in that kind of environment and helping each other out to pass these little tasks. Some of them were actually really big tasks. I really felt like the big brother around there. And so to receive Top Candidate and the Comrade Award, it just reminded me that I was on the right path and that the Creator was rewarding me. And to receive those awards, in the environment at the graduation, to have my mother there and all these important delegates there, really shaped me as a professional, coming from People's Jewelers, learning more about my etiquette and how I communicate with customers and all walks of life, to then joining the then going to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, and then going to the Canadian Forces military. If you can understand my mindset in how I looked at Canada and being part of the Canadian Forces, that was very challenging for me. The following summer, I was actually able to go back as a mentor. So the Black Bear program is the only program that has a mentorship aspect to it. And a mentorship is basically a military staff helping to coach the new recruits to graduate. Being able to go back as a mentor was very rewarding for me. And that experience, going back as a mentor, especially for the Black Bear program, which I learned so much about myself, and so much that, I've learned that my personal struggles are very different and almost felt small compared to some of the other struggles other young people are experiencing. And so that really shaped my perspective. It was a very humbling experience for me. And so going back as a mentor, that experience solidified for me. I want to dedicate my professional career working with young people. And so after that summer, I started applying for jobs working for youth. And one of the jobs that was open was a job working at Wabeno as a youth diversion coordinator. And that job involved me working with young people in conflict with the law. And so I applied for that job, and shout out to Vicky for hiring me and giving me a chance. I just was fresh out of the military, so I was very much ready for this type of responsibility. And so working at Wabeno, that was a dream job for me. To be able to work frontline in the community with young people who are in conflict with the law, and providing them opportunities to find a different path to take other than the one that they're on, because it's clearly leading them in the wrong direction. I figured, this was something I became very passionate about. Working there, very closely with Chris Miyawasagi. He was my office mate, and he was the reintegration coordinator. And that tag team was very unstoppable in the community. So big shout out to Chris Miyawasagi. And we did a lot for the community. We created direct protocols with the police so that when a young person became in conflict with the law, they can be directly referred to our program. We developed a direct protocol with the courthouse, the youth court, where if a young person identified as Indigenous, they could also be referred directly to our program. And as a result, I received an award from the Committee of Youth Officers, and I received the Community for Youth Service Award. And that again was, I felt the Creator reminding me that this is the path that you're supposed to be on, and the Creator was rewarding me for sticking to that path and sticking to my truth. And so that job was an amazing, life-changing experience again. Teaching me a lot more about my Indigenous heritage, my Indigenous history, the legal system, working with the courthouse, working with the Ottawa Police Service, building those relationships building bridges, with those service providers to get culturally appropriate programming for our young people in the community. I developed a great positive reputation working with young people and, really helping them find themselves. Working there for 3 years, I was still growing as a man and as a professional. And so there was an opportunity for me to work for the Bayview Yards, which was a new contract with the government to open up an innovation center. I was able to get employed through Prototype D, and Prototype D received the contract to operate the Makerspace and Advanced Digital Media Lab, and Janik Elford hired me to be director of the Digital Media Lab. And so working 3 years at Wabeno and still wanting to grow my professional career, I took the leap, further into entrepreneurship, working with other entrepreneurs, small startups, medium-sized startups, businesses, tech companies, and being there at the forefront of the Innovation Center Bayview Yards, opening up this brand new center. And, working there and building a business from the ground up. We managed a $4.6 million contract to be able to operate that space, doing a lot of the procurement, doing a lot of the recruiting, the hiring. Being a director for the first time was a huge learning curve, and really helped solidify my perspective in how to manage myself and learning how to manage other people and expectations. And so I learned a lot from that experience. So thank you to Janik Elford, thank you to Jason Elford, thank you to the Innovation Center Bayview Yards for hiring myself to be able to provide value in that sort of environment. I worked there for about 1.5 years. Now this is where the story actually overlaps. And so I got to take you back to 2010. When I moved to Ottawa, I started getting into events. My father being an artist, my mother being an artist. I grew up with music as a huge part of my upbringing. My brother was a DJ, and you can go back to my story vlog 1 actually, or my story vlog 2 as a child, and you'll be able to get a more in-depth perspective of what I mean when it comes to my early childhood influences. Being influenced through art and music, I've always had a passion for music. Music was a huge part of my teenage years, going into my adult years, as a means of expressing my perspective, my anger, sharing my story through song and lyric. And, it really shaped me as a man in the sense of being able to hear myself and, change the type of person that I heard and kind of adapt the type of person I wanted to become. Music did a lot for me. And so being involved in music now, taking you back to 2010 when I moved to Ottawa, it was about 2011 that I performed for the first time at the Summer Solstice Festival for their talent contest, where I got first place. And we received $5,000. I have to give a big shout out to Brock Lewis, who joined me in that performance to help solidify the win. We broke bread. You can go back to my story vlog, SSIF, the Summer Solstice Indigenous Festival, and I go more in depth about that experience. And so that winning that type of money, because I got it from the community, I actually put it back to the community by hosting Ottawa's first Indigenous fashion show. There was no Indigenous fashion show in Ottawa, and I was the first to actually host that. And so big shout out to my homie E-Man the Warrior, who helped me host the first one. And then that has been the pivot point for my annual Indigenous art, music, and fashion show that I've done for 5 years now. And we're just going into year 6. And doing that show, that Indigenous art, music, and fashion show, working at Wabeno, taking that transition to be a director at the Innovation Center Bayview Yards, exploring what entrepreneurship meant to me, learning more about my historical context. That show was in a huge platform that I created this positive environment for Indigenous people, young and mature, who have a talent in music or design, fashion, modeling, to provide that positive environment for them to explore that as a potential career, as an opportunity to express themselves, share their voice, be heard, build a career, establish yourself in the music industry, establish yourself in the community. And so my annual art, music, and fashion show is pretty much, a combination of life experience that I wanted to continue to give back to the community. And so that first place prize money, I went back into the community, and I've been recycling that event every year. Now, $3,000 to the capacity of show that I host because I want to give the community something big. And I also learned from Allison Fisher from Wabeno that, Wabeno Center is a center of excellence, as a national center of excellence. And Allison Fisher intentionally makes it one of the most beautiful places to be, because that's how Indigenous people are supposed to be treated, is having beautiful, healthy, positive spaces to go to, surrounded by art and amazing architecture. And so learning that from Allison Fisher, that's the type of experience I want to share to our young people in the community. And so my annual Indigenous art, music, and fashion show, I've always wanted to go big, because that's what I feel our Indigenous people deserve, is big, flashy, mainstream. And I wanted to just give anybody who was interested an opportunity. Now, to keep this real, $3,000 didn't really go far in regards to surplus capital for me to recycle into the next event. I've had to come out of pocket almost every year, pretty much every year. I've had to come out of pocket to host my annual Indigenous art, music, and fashion show, because I care about the community that much. And hosting that event has taught me so much about event management, organizing, backstage, front stage, lighting, tech, sound, dance, theater, fashion, modeling, all these other elements, doing it for 5+ years. It's been an amazing journey. And on top of that, I'm also a hip hop artist, and being in the Indigenous music industry has been a challenge because, I don't quite look Indigenous. I'm not that type of stereotypical version of an Indigenous person, which I actually am passionate about, because I'm helpful in breaking down that stereotype and realizing that I'm just as Indigenous as anybody else. And sometimes, I really feel I come from a strong rooted background of indigeneity. My mother being from Saskatchewan, my grandmother being the first chief of Ocean Man, my auntie currently being chief. I go back to and from my First Nation community fairly regularly, once a year here and there. I grew up on the res, going to and from Flower Day, going to the powwow and stuff like that. And so my Indigenous heritage is very much rooted to my core, going through a becoming a man ceremony, getting my spirit name, working at Wabeno, being part of the community. I feel very rooted in my indigeneity. And so my annual Indigenous art, music, and fashion show has helped me levitate the message for Canada in regards to who Indigenous people are. And if you can trace that back to my experience working for the TRC, that I want to be the best version of a human being to show Canada what Indigenous people really are and how we represent. And so this art, music, and fashion show is a huge reflection of that. And that's pretty much where I'm at now, is where my music career has taken me throughout the province, throughout this country to perform. I hosted the first Indigenized high school tour, where I, brought some of the youth that I've been working with and sharing all of my resources with to provide them opportunity to build their careers. And so we did this Indigenized high school tour, which first was was going to be an opportunity for me to kind of promote my album. But every time I get on stage, I want to share that experience, that moment, with anybody up and coming who has a potential talent, especially a passion for music. And so giving those opportunities to these young people to share their stories, share their truth, was massive in regards to the impact it created for Ottawa, especially the fact that now being in 2019, going into 2020, we started that high school tour back in 2018. The impact was so massive. And in particular, during a time and era where Indigenous history has been more or less part of the curriculum because of the work that the TRC has done. All these things are happening all simultaneously, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that I've been part of those historical moments through time. And so for me to be in this position, to be able to share my truth, share my story, share my historical context of Indigenous people to such a large audience has been a huge passion of mine. Right now, being in December 2019, I'm self-employed entrepreneur for 2 years. This is my second year being self-employed. I've taken a contract to work with Manitoba Mucklucks, which is one of the largest Indigenous retail companies in Canada, which is amazing. One of the fastest growing Indigenous companies in Canada, which is incredible to work for. I'm a huge believer in the product, and I have a great experience working for them. And so I'm now in a contract working with Manitoba Mucklucks. I'm also balancing my main hustle as an entrepreneur, doing music, presentations, performances, and I've just built the first Indigenous-owned profit-sharing music streaming platform called Tribe Music. And that platform is simply a reflection of my career as an artist, how difficult it is to make a, consistent revenue that you can live off of. And this Tribe Music platform is a way to increase value for artists in the music industry, but also provide a consistent monthly income to help sustain your career as an artist. And as well, we're gonna be recycling that money back into the community because that's what I've done from the beginning. And that's where we're at now in 2019, going into 2020. I feel very grateful for these life experiences that I have, and I thought that it'd be very important for me to share those with you. I think the one experience that I forgot to share is in 2016 or 2017, the Senate for Aboriginal Peoples, they hosted their first event where they invited Indigenous leaders from across Canada to share to the Senate their perspective and stories on how we can achieve reconciliation and how we can better serve our Indigenous people within Canada. And I was one of those young leaders, and I feel so grateful to be part of that first cohort. And, being the person I am, the rapper I am, a little bit rebellious, I decided that I'm just gonna drop a verse. And so I was the first native hip hop artist to drop a verse in the Senate. You can go look that up, you can Google it. It's there. And so I made history by being the first, Indigenous artist to drop a verse in the Senate. And I dropped a verse from my track called State of Emergency, which was a reflection of youth suicides, specifically in Attawapiskat. And so, my music career has taken me all throughout Canada. My art, music, and fashion show has been a huge positive impact to provide opportunity for youth. I've developed my professional career working in different professional environments. And, I just feel so grateful for the Creator and for all the people that I've met along my journey, because I couldn't get anywhere without those people in your circle. And I think that's a huge lesson learned at the end of the day, is that the results are nothing but positive. And my lessons learned is that you definitely want to be nice to everybody you can, because you never know who you meet and who they know to get you a specific position somewhere, somehow. And so sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's definitely a key aspect. I'm very much a yes person. So another lesson learned is to always say yes to opportunities, big or small. And I've done a lot of things for free. I've done a lot of things for a low rate. I've done a lot of things for an expensive rate. And I like to work with the specific entity that is inquiring to hire me to work with the budgets that they have available, so that I can, provide whatever value in a large scale as I can. That's where I'm at. Justin Holness as a professional, Jack Coda as an artist, and merging the two, I feel very, excited about my future going into 2020. And being self-employed, it's really taught me a lot about ambition, about hustle and grind and results and consistency, scheduling, budgeting, all these things. And so I feel very excited for what 2020 has to hold. As a self-employed entrepreneur, building the success that I have, you're definitely gonna stumble across the haters. You're gonna stumble across the vulture culture. And the best way I can say to get through those difficult times is to stick to your truth, Always be honest, always be yourself, and don't change for nobody, and just always continue working on being a better version of yourself in the most healthiest way possible. So thank you guys for listening to the story vlog. I know it was a long one, but it's an important one. I had to put my entire professional career into this one video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took something away from it. You can find all my contact information on any of my social media platforms. Check out Tribe Music, subscribe today, help us grow our platform, help us create a larger impact for the community, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Wash day.